Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Elise. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a cup of coffee or tea or a snack. This is a really long video, but I wanted to show you how I made 6 different cards using one release. Here is a look at the cards we are going to be making today. Let's get into the products. So I will say some of this, a lot of these cards use the Hero Arts, my monthly hero kit from January. And I know that this is no longer available. But some of the products I'm using were from the add-on, which are available in the permanent collection. And I know that so many of you probably get the Hero Arts, my monthly hero kit. So I thought that, if you had the kit and were looking for ideas, that this would still be relevant to you. So here is a look at the supplies. Here is a look at the first card that we're going to be doing. So this one actually does not use any elements from the main kit. So I have got these dies here. The dies are from the Bees and Flowers Fancy Dies. And I've die cut that twice using my Gemini Junior machine. I just left all these dies connected because I just thought it'd be easier. Going ahead and using some Gina K inks and some blending brushes. Some of the blending brushes are from Picket Fence Studio and some are from Trinity Stamps. Just laying on some color. I did die cut these from Bristle Smooth cardstock so that I would get a really nice blend. And I'm just going ahead and adding some color. Now you could definitely add 2 colors if you wanted to, if you're really ambitious and wanted a little bit more dimension. But for me, 1 color is plenty, especially for these little stems because they're so thin. Also, you could, if you wanted more dimension on your card, you could use 2 different shades of green. I just used 1 here today. So once I've got all of those stems done, I'm just going to wipe off my Waffle Flower mini media mat here. I'm just using like a dry microfiber cloth. I buy these off Amazon. So they're really nothing fancy. But once I get that done, I'm going to move on to my next color. So I'm going to take a little bit of Gina K powder blue and add blue to some of these flowers just so that I get a different color other than just yellow. I want to add in something a little bit different. I'm also going to add some blue to the wings of these bees. I never quite did get these bees exactly the way that I wanted them. So there may be a better way to color these, but I was already doing all this ink blending for all the flowers, so it just made my life easy. So now I've got those bees done. Again, wiping my mat off, and then I'll go in and do a bunch of the yellows. So I've got a few shades of yellow here. Like I said, all of these inks are from Gina K, and they are all linked down below. All of the supplies I'm using today are linked down below in case you are looking for anything. So just going in with that yellow, adding some pops of color. I think that this adds so much fun, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure a lot of us are tired of the cold and wanting spring to be here. And so using all of this yellow and making all of these yellow cards was just a whole lot of fun. It just made me really, really happy to get to use so much yellow. So just going in, it's nice these Trinity blending brushes are kind of tapered at the top. So there's almost like a little point. So I can really get into smaller areas just using that little point at the top. So going in with a different shade of yellow now, just to add a little bit of interest and so that not all of my flowers are exactly the same. And then going in finally, I believe the shade is called Honey Mustard, to just do the centers of the flowers. Like I said, that Trinity blender brush has that little point, so it makes it really, really easy. Just going in, and then I've got these 2 flowers left to the side, and I decided for something different, I wanted those to be blue, just to add a little bit more color variation. So I just go back in with that powdered blue and give those a little bit of color. Now I won't end up using all of the images that I've colored, but I'll save the extras and use them on a future project. I just figured while I was doing the die cutting, might as well do it all. I've got a panel here that I'm going to use for my card. And I didn't want these flowers to sit on just a white cardstock. So I'm just going in with some yellow ink and adding a little bit of color to add some dimension to this card. I've got my MISTI here, and I'm going to be doing some stamping. This Hello Sunshine greeting comes from the Bee and Flowers Wreath stamp set. And I'm just going to stamp that quite a few times with this darker yellow ink so that I get a nice darker shade. I got a good impression the first time I was just going for a darker shade. Now using some liquid glue. This is Gina K Connect glue. It's my favorite liquid glue, just to add some glue down so that I can glue down these flowers. I did kind of lay these out and then use a piece of Post-it tape to kind of tape them all together so that I could place them all down at once. But honestly, this ended up being more of a hassle than it was worth. And if I did this card again, I would just lay these all down individually, because it was kind of annoying to get them to stick to that piece of Post-it tape. But once I've got all of these stuck down, I can add the next set of flowers just beneath it. So I'm trying to get a little bit of variation, putting kind of those more tan looking flowers and separating them, making sure that there's blue on both sides. You get the idea. Of course, my stems hang off, so I'm just taking some scissors and snipping those off. This panel here that I am adhering onto is A2 sized. Just going to use some tape runner and adhere that down to my card base. All of my card bases today are Nina Classic Crest Solar White 110 pound. And that completes the first card. Here is a look at the second card, a much more watercolor look. And this is using that large floral image from the main kit. Going ahead and stamping this down with some Versamark ink. This piece of paper is also Bristol Smooth cardstock because I'm going to be doing some coloring with zig markers. Once I have a good stamped impression, I am going to heat emboss that with white embossing powder from Hero Arts. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but there is white embossing powder on this panel. And once I get that done, I will heat set that. And then we can move on to a little bit more stamping. I wanted some bees for these flowers, so I am also stamping some bees. I'm using just a black ink that is Copic marker friendly, watercolor friendly, just some basic black ink. And that works really well with these zig markers. So at first, when I thought of this card design, I thought that I wanted to put the bees on this card. And in the end, I don't use them for this card, but I use them for another card coming up. So I'm just using some zig markers. I have a pretty basic pack and then a few singles that I've purchased over time. But these are really, really fun and easy to work with. On these blue wings, I just use some of the blender pen to blend out the blue. And that blender pen really does come in handy, especially for some of these lighter colors where there isn't a secondary color for me to blend out with. Where on the bees, I used a darker yellow for the sides and then a lighter yellow to blend with. Once I have these bees done, I'm going to move on to the flower image. I am just using one shade of brown for all of the branch portion of these flowers. And then I will use 2 shades of green for the leaves, and the same yellows that I used for the bees, I will use for the flowers. So I am just going through, this is sped up because this is quite a bit of coloring. So I'm just going ahead and getting all of this completed. I wanted to leave this in case you wanted to see how I colored these. I wanted this to be a really kind of organic look, and so it's really messy, but that is okay with me. For something like this that I know I'm going to do pretty messy, I will pretty much always heat emboss it. The heat embossing really provides like little wells for the coloring to sit in and makes it so that basically it contains your coloring. If you have a hard time with control on these types of pens, or coloring inside of the lines, sometimes, you're not paying perfect attention and you color outside of the lines a little bit. Heat embossing will just keep everything trapped in, and it really makes it a no-brainer. Now, I would not suggest doing heat embossing and then Copic coloring. Copic nibs are really sensitive to the powder that is used for heat embossing, and you can ruin the ends of the nibs. And just because those markers are so expensive, I would not suggest doing that so that you don't ruin the marker tips. But for something like this where, these are watercolor based and the brushes are fine to interact with the heat embossing lines, there is no harm in doing this. It's also great for watercoloring. I'm not a very good watercolorer, and so I will often use heat embossing when doing my watercoloring just to keep everything contained. So, some ideas for you. Also, this would work with any water-based marker. So if you have the Arteza, I don't ever know which way to pronounce that company's name. If you have those markers, then that would also work with these or any other water-based marker. I think Stampin' Up! Makes a water-based marker. So lots of choices there. I am using the blender pen on these yellow flowers just because I kind of wanted it to look like they were more like fading off into nothing. I really wanted this to be like a light look, but it's a little hard to achieve. The yellows that I have for zigs are all very bright. So I kind of wish I had something that was maybe a little bit more pale and muted, so I may seek that out to add that to my collection. It's really nice. Some websites, I know Ellen Hudson is one, allows you to just buy the single color zigs. So for example, when I started out with these, I bought the 48 pack off of Amazon, but I think all in all there are over 100 of these markers. So there's quite a few that I don't have, but I don't want to buy another multi-pack because then I'll have duplicates. So instead, as I find pens that I wish that I had, I can just buy the one-offs from Ellen Hudson. It is more expensive to do it that way, but then you end up with exactly the colors that you want. So I highly recommend looking into that if you're looking to start out a zig collection. Once I have all of my coloring done, I will go ahead and just make sure that I don't have any color on the heat embossing, and we'll just rub that with a dry cloth. Now I wanted a little bit of splatter on my background, so I'm taking my card base here. I'm just doing this directly onto my card base and an acrylic black, and taking some of those yellow colors of zig and just adding a little bit of splatter with some water. So just scribble those onto a little block here, add just a little bit of water, take a watercolor brush and add some splatters. It's a little bit hard to see on camera, but in real life it is very obvious on this card that there are some splatters in the background. So I thought this was a really fun touch and something different to add, especially as this is like a more organic looking card, I guess. Once that's dry, I am going to take one of the sentiments from the kit and some wild dandelion ink from Gina and just stamp that down, and I'll hit that a couple times again just to get a good dark color payoff. And again, I'm stamping this directly onto my card base. I'm not doing another panel. I just took some foam tape. This is just 3M foam tape, and I am going to pop up that large flower across my card panel here, obviously leaving room for that sentiment, but this floral image is really designed nicely to go straight across. Just going to take that overhang and cut it off from the top, and then that completes the second card. This one was really, really fun to make and definitely something different than what I normally do. Okay, here is a look at the third card. This one is really, really fun and definitely the most clean and simple. You guys probably know I gravitate heavily towards clean and simple. So this one was definitely one of my favorites. Taking those bees from the main kit and going ahead and stamping those with some black ink. This is Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, by the way. And I've got my MISTI tool out, so I might as well stamp them twice. I just rotate my piece and stamp them a second time. Off camera, I went ahead and Copic colored these. The Copic coloring is nothing fancy. It is these 4 markers. Sorry, it's a little bit blurry, but it's Y13, 15, 17, and B quadruple 0 for the wings. Just going to go ahead and run these through my die cut machine with the coordinating dies. I did stamp those bees on Nina Classic Crest Solar White 110 pound because I was going to do some Copic coloring. And I am going to run that through my Gemini. I've also got a piece of that glitter cardstock from the Hero Arts kit and that honeycomb shape that comes in the main kit as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and run those through my die cutting machine at the same time. Once that is out, I need to do a little bit of fussy cutting, which if you watch my channel at all, you know I don't like to fussy cut, but I had to for this card. I just wanted the outline of the honeycomb. This is really meant to be die cut and then used as like a cutout on a card instead of the die cut itself. So just went around and did some fussy cutting, pretty simple. I've got my reverse tweezers here holding this in place and adding some liquid glue so that I can get this down onto my card base. Once I have got that in place, I'm just going to press that down. I'm going to stamp the sentiment, which also comes from the main kit. This main kit had really, really cute sentiments in it. Lots for many, many different occasions. Just using that black ink again. And I've got some of those bees here. I'm going to pop them up using some foam tape. I love using foam tape on projects just to add a little bit more dimension and interest to my cards. So just getting little slivers of this tape on to the back of these bees And then I'll adhere them down to those honeycombs. I thought this card needed a little bit something else. So I went ahead and got out some Nuvo drops. I believe these are the drops in buttermilk. This is like kind of the only yellow color I had. I'm just adding a little scattering of these around my card. A few big ones, a few smaller ones. And then I'm just going to add some glitter pen to the wings. Again, this is one of those things where you can really see this in real life, but it's hard in a video. And then I'm adding some Nuvo Tonic Glaze to the wings to make them shiny. And that completes that card. It's so fun. This is a card that I made, again, a little bit out of my comfort zone. Just a little bit something more watercolor-y, I guess you could say. So I've got this stamp that does honeycombs from the main kit, and I'm just stamping that with some rusty hinge onto a piece of scrap watercolor paper. And that I've got that oxide ink, and what I'm doing is spraying it every time I'm going to stamp it with my Distress ink, the water sprayer. If I get too much, I just kind of dab it off a little bit with my dry cloth. And I'm just making a little honeycomb pattern here, but the water really adds a little bit of movement and interest to this honeycomb pattern. It's really, really fun. You could definitely go around and do like an entire card front, kind of like geometrically fitting these little honeycombs together. I did want some on the other side as well, so I went ahead and stamped it again. Then using another piece of scrap watercolor paper, I am going to stamp some bees down, just so that these were in the same paper. This is Canson XL watercolor paper. Watercolor paper is not typically bright white like Nina or Bristle smooth paper is. And so to make these bees blend more, I did want them to also be on watercolor paper. I'm gonna take nested rectangle die from Waffle Flower and cut out a panel from that panel that I made with all of the little hexagons honeycomb. I'll run that through my die cut machine off camera, off screen. You can see I did do those, bees using the zig markers again. So just kind of placing these down where I think that they will go and look good. It's often good to work in odd numbers. That way your eye is just more visually drawn to an odd number, especially something in threes. So just keep that in mind as you design cards. That's just a good tip, just to make your cards pop a little bit. So once I've got these kind of where I want them, I'm just going to take a greeting. This comes from that floral wreath and bees stamp set. This is Just Because I Love You. I'm going to stamp that down a couple times using that rusty hinge Distress oxide ink again. This was also really fun for me because I don't think I've ever used this oxide ink before, and I really, really like it. I'll definitely be using it again. I'm just going to go ahead and stamp these little bee trails. I thought these were so much fun, and just added a little bit of something else. I thought that the background of this card needed a little bit more color, something different, especially because the sentiment is the same color. So once again, using foam tape to pop up my little bees, give my card a little bit of dimension. And these are okay, the bees are, if they overhang, because this card panel is smaller than my A2 size card base. I'm going to use some fun foam to give dimension to that entire panel. Foam is a really cost-effective way to get some dimension. Also, it's great for going through the mail because it's very even and your card base won't get crushed by the mail machine. Using some liquid glue to get that down, and I will adhere that to my A2 size card base, which, as you guys know, is Neenah Classic Crest Solar White. And that will complete the 4th card project. So I have 2 more projects here that are stitching based. So I had some stitch backgrounds that I made with these kits in mind. So that one with all the flowers, that is a Concord and 9th set. And then the basic stitch panel, that actually is from Paper Smooches. I don't think that they are in business anymore, but I'll link something similar down below. I've got a little nested hexagon that comes from Waffle Flower. Hero Arts did come out with some of those, but I already had these ones from Waffle Flower, so I didn't need to buy those as well. Just taking some scrap paper here to stamp my sentiments down onto, and then I will use that hexagon to do my die cutting to get this as like a little focal sentiment. And for the other card, for the floral based card, I used this Hello, and this comes from an older Hero Art stamp set. And I just stamped that onto some Wild Dandelion cardstock from Gina K. And I'll be using that exact same hexagon to do my die cutting from. And again, I'm just using that same Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink because I already had it out. And this day that I was doing all this, I could not find my VersaFine Onyx Black. It was a tragedy, but I've since found it. I cleaned up and I did find it. So just going to go ahead and do some die cutting. So I've got that Sweet as Can Be and the Hello. I've got these leftover bees from my previous coloring. Always color more than you think that you need. I'm just going to take some foam tape and pop these up onto my panels, both the sentiments and the bees. When I am adhering anything to cards that I've done stitching, or my stitching card to a card base, I pretty much always just use foam tape, especially this like Scotch 3M foam tape, because it's meant for like foam mounting. So it's very, very strong and it will attach really well to the floss that I've used. So here you can see I'm adhering that panel on. I've got little foam pieces in between all of these flowers. And I've already got everything adhered to the front. So then I can just go ahead and adhere this down to my A2 card base. Like I said, the foam mount is really the best way that I've found to adhere my stitching cards, the card fronts to a base. And that will complete my last 2 cards. I had so much fun the day that I filmed this and I made all of these cards. I hope that you guys were inspired and maybe found some ideas. Even if you don't have this card kit, I think that these ideas can be replicated. And it's just a way to look at a set where maybe we would think, you know I can make this one card here, but here might be some ideas to make different cards or different technique ideas. If you liked this video, I'd love to have you subscribe if you're new. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will catch you in the next one.